The Process Podcast, breaking down the daily habits, processes, and tools of high achievers. Now, here's your host, Brad Wilson.
Hey there, boys and girls. Welcome to the Process Podcast. This is your host, Brad Wilson. If you're like me, which if you're listening to this show, I have a suspicion you just might be, and you have a burning desire to learn all about how amazing humans spend their days on this earth so that you can implement their habits, rituals, and routines into your own daily life, take a couple of seconds and click that subscribe button to ensure that you never miss an episode. On today's show, I have with me Marshawn Evans Daniels. She's a former Miss America finalist, a Georgetown graduated attorney, high-powered entrepreneur, TV commentator, and was also a contestant on The Apprentice. Marshawn is the author of the book Believe Bigger, Discover the Path to Your Life Purpose. Simply speaking, she does a lot of amazing, amazing things. One of the themes that she writes about in her book and we discuss in the show is disruption. If you really want your life to change, what you're asking for is disruption. And disruption is very often not a pretty or comfortable thing. It tears down your current vision of your future and replaces it with something you can't even imagine. For Marshawn, the unasked for disruption that blew her own internal story to smithereens came in the form of discovering her fiance had been unfaithful to her 6 days before her wedding and directly after she had dismantled a multi-million-dollar talent management company she had built from the ground up. That disruption put Marshawn on the path of inspiring and empowering millions of people and finding the person she was destined to spend the rest of her life with, which we talk about in this episode. You'll also learn how to effectively hire and collaborate with members of your team, how to maximize your strengths instead of constantly covering up your weaknesses, the power of daily journaling, and how to ensure you get maximum bang for your buck in your daily practice, and much more. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with the resilient and powerful Marshawn Evans Daniels. Marshawn, good morning. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
I am stoked for you to be here. Okay, so in your book, you tell a story about your first foray into babysitting. And, could you share that with me?
Yeah, so I was about 11 years old, and I grew up in the suburbs of North Texas. Now, for those who are listening, I'm an African-American woman growing up in Texas, which is still kind of an emerging state, recognizing racial equality and normalness. And that was really significant for me because my family was the only Black family on our street. And also, my brother and I were 2 of 5 Black kids in our entire school. So with that background, one of my neighbors who I knew, but we weren't very close with their family, knocks on the door and asks if I would be willing to fill in on short notice for babysitting. Now, I had been staring, just people watching out the window, and I saw her walking up and down the street really quickly. And then I was kind of surprised, 1, that she stopped, 2, that she walked up to our house, and 3, that she wanted me at 11 years old to watch her kiddos. So we rush over to her house. She kind of explains how to make sure her house doesn't burn down, that her kids will end up in child protective custody within my care. And then she's gone, and she comes back about 2 hours later, and she says that she asked how things went. And I said, things went fine. What I really wanted to say is, you raise babies, kids. But I was just going to that. And she proceeds to say, I didn't have an opportunity to stop by the bank. All I have, and she reaches into her back pocket and pulls out these crumbled bills. She goes, oh, this is all I have. I have a 1 and a 5. Which do you want? And I find myself staring, just like I was staring out of these blinds, thinking that nobody saw me. She sees me, and now I'm staring again, but this time I had a choice. And I wanted to ask for both. But I felt greedy and guilty and like I would be inappropriate, rude, unladylike to ask for both, much less even just the 5.
I do have a question here that kind of came to me while I was reading the book is why did she do that? Why do you think she made the choice in the first place? That's kind of a weird.
Well, that may have been all she had on her. And I think that what was interesting is that she knew, and I didn't realize this until I told this story on dozens and dozens of stages around the world this year. And when I asked for some aha moments or Q&A, and one of the persons said, well, she clearly already knew that you were worthy of both, which is why she basically qualified, this is all I have. But really, the bigger question is, why did I feel guilty for asking for what I had already earned?
Sure. Yeah.
What I already deserved. I filled in on short notice. I watched 2 kids that didn't know me, and I cleaned up the living room. Some of your listeners probably want to hire me right now.
I'll hire you. Come on.
And so a lot of times we go above and beyond, hoping that somebody will notice us. And so when she asked me, which do you want? I said, in my heart, I wanted more, but I ended up settling for less. And so I said, I'll take the one. And then she did something that was really unique, is she pulled both bills back and she said, are you sure? I had another chance. And I said, yes, ma'am, I'm sure. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I don't want to be that same problem child that I'm labeled at school as the only Black girl in my class, already told that I talk too much, already labeled as a lot of stereotypes that a lot of Black children get very early on. This was the first time that teachers had Black students in their classroom. So there were a lot of different challenges that my brother and I had to face. So I didn't want those same problems to spill into my neighborhood and to face these perceptions. So I thought if I was just polite and I just took the one, that would be more likable, that would be more appropriate. And so what I learned very clearly, well, first of all, let me say, I was proud of myself because I earned something. Even if it was $1, I earned something, I got paid for my work. But I also learned that if you, and I say this in my new book, Believe Bigger, if you allow yourself to settle for less, nobody is obligated to stop you. And that is a really powerful and important lesson that has stuck with me for a long time. And one of the bigger, even larger questions is, why do we feel guilty for asking for what we want? Where does that nervous, gnawing feeling where you start doubting yourself or second guessing and you don't have a lot of confidence and you feel inappropriate, you feel like just off, you feel, it's that feeling. And it's that voice that I call little me. And so that's the first time that I have a strong remembrance of having a decision to make, and where this voice that I call little me stood up, and I chose to listen to little me. And the 5 really represents this other voice called future me, which is trying to usher us into greatness. And, what would happen if we made more $5 decisions? When it was tough, when it was uncomfortable, when you're having to ask for what you're worth, what would unlock if we did that? So I was only 11, but it was a big lesson.
It's an incredible lesson. And the reason that I asked I guess why you thought she, even offered you that choice is because of the future lesson, right? I mean, if more people were to ask their children and give them a choice of 2 things, and then whichever they choose, and then have that conversation with them, like it's wisdom that you've taken with you throughout your whole life. And I dare say it's generated more than $4 over the course of your career, right?
I would say so. Some of the men and women that enroll in my high-end business programs now, a lot of times we will give them a framed $5 bill to show them, like, hey, make bold, courageous decisions, not just one time, but day in and day out. And sometimes we'll make the $5 choice, but sometimes we make it when we feel like it's safe. Sometimes we make it because we have a sense of Superman or Wonder Woman-ness in the moment. And then other times we won't. And we're not always going to make the $5 choice. Someday we're going to make less than the dollar. We're going to make a penny choice. That's really beneath ourselves. And it doesn't mean that everything can't switch in just a moment as well, too. But the real thing is this. Recognize when your little me is speaking. Little me is the voice of fear, the voice that says, who do you think you are? You're living beyond yourself. You're being bigger than your britches. That's not appropriate. That wouldn't be right. That would ruffle feathers or upset the cart. Little me is that voice that wants to keep you small intentionally, because little me wants you to live beneath your greatness. So at least if we can be aware of it, we can at least have a chance to defeat it.
How do we build awareness to recognizing when little me is talking?
That's a really good question. So I look at these conversations in our head, right? I feel like nobody wants to admit it, but we all have a lot of voices happening inside of our head. And I always say that God speaks in cans and not in can'ts. And for me, that's how I use it as my filter, regardless if it's a spiritual decision, a personal, a relational, a financial, something that has to do with my business, a leadership decision, and even my perception of other people. Because little me will cause you to pollute your view, will become a lens of where you'll see other people become critical, judgmental, and you're just looking through a lens that's at a lower frequency and a lower level. So if God speaks in cans and not in can'ts, and that means when we're looking at things in terms of possibility, I call it a possibility mindset as opposed to a survival mindset. A lot of times we're thinking about, we're thinking from a place of lack. I can't do this, or this is too hard, or we're anticipating pain. We're anticipating something is going to be challenging. That's the little me voice who's trying to cloud your view from a place of survival, which gets you to operate in survival land. Versus the whole idea of God speaking in cans is, well, what can I do? Or what does this person have? Looking at things in terms of possibility. What might happen that is amazing when I take this step? And starting to envision things as though you want them, not necessarily as though they actually appear. And yes, there are always worst case scenarios, but we tend to build and we become excellent advocates for atrocities happening. And so I always look at it, God speaks in cans, not in can'ts, about yourself. If you're feeling incapable, that's little me telling you you're not good enough. That's a can't. I also say that from a spiritual standpoint, I've always believed, God is infinite. There's nothing impossible for God. So therefore, if I were to say I can't do something, and I'm someone who believes that God lives within me, then I'm saying he can't do something or that God can't do something. And I don't want to adopt that as my identity. Now, it's a fight for all of us, but the awareness I look as the most simple filter I have is can versus can't. If I'm coming from a can't standpoint, it's almost like running a race behind the starting line and then anchoring your feet at that starting line. Even though you're in position, you look like you're ready to go, but you've locked one foot and you're never going to cross the finish line because you started with a can't mindset, but you're expecting somehow to finish the race.
I love that. We tend to get lost in these future simulations of doom and gloom that freeze us from taking action because we're too afraid. We're afraid we might screw something up, right? And I mean, I had these own fears, but you have to screw stuff up. You have to mess up and learn and grow. And that's just the process of growth. And, that's kind of the point of this show, right? If you keep the process going and doing the things that will get you to your goal, you will eventually get there. It might take longer than you imagine, and it might be harder. It will be harder than you imagine.
But there's the other thing, the destination may not be what you think it is. I think it's good to have goals, but I think we can also make these goals, the best word I can think of are idols that we are so attached to and we become addicted to it that we almost squeeze out the surprises and possibility and miracles that can happen along the way. So, I'm a slightly obsessed overachiever when it comes to achieving goals. And I have to say that out loud because one of the things I also say in Believe Bigger is that each of us are addicts. The question is, which is our addiction of choice in terms of how we've identified ourselves. For me, being labeled a problem child, I found I could turn people's expectations into positive ones and I could receive positive affirmation if I was succeeding and achieving. And so I thought that going after goals, and there's a lot of positive aspects of having a plan, having a goal, having something that you shoot. But what if the goal is just designed to get you on the path, but it's not the actual end destination? And a lot of the things that the business that I started that became a multi-million-dollar coaching company was not what I intended. It was a backup plan while I could figure out something. It was something I was just doing to pass time while I could do something that I really wanted to do and what I thought I was going to be doing. And so the goals are great, and even working towards them are fantastic. But this is why I believe in believing bigger. And let me just say that believing bigger is not about stuff. It's not about cars. It's not about houses and superficial things. There's nothing wrong with the things. But it is about living beyond yourself. It's about believing that you have a higher purpose, you have a higher mission, that your life is not your own, And that if you operate with a mindset of seeing into the realm of the unseen, that you'll do things that have never been done. That requires a level of humility to realize, I don't know everything. I don't know exactly where I'm going. It's nice to say that in this entrepreneurial land, and makes all those clear-minded people make us confused people look like dunces, like they got it together and we don't. Look, if you don't know exactly where you're going, let me just affirm to you that maybe that means you're on the right path. Set some goals, set some desires, but also be flexible. Be humble enough to say, I'm going to go after these goals, but I'm also going to pivot when I see something that speaks to a higher, that aligns with my values and my vision. We got to take some pivots fully in alignment with values, fully in alignment with belief, but also stretching beyond our comfort zones to step into a greater place too.
And when we stretch beyond our comfort zones, like you said, doors open that you never would have seen, couldn't even have imagined. Opportunities just have a way of presenting themselves that can lead you down some path that's completely different than what you had intended, but it allows you to do bigger things and greater things. And
well, I went off all over the place when you were asking about the goals, because the thing that has been one of my biggest challenges is letting go. It's a daily thing. Because you're
a high achiever. It's your addiction. You want to get it, right?
You want to get it. And I feel like I have enough drive in me to inspire a whole generation. So with that, though, there can become a level of your ego that can take you off of your path. A lot of people don't talk about this because we talk so much in the entrepreneurial world. We talk about success and money and all of those things. But we have a lot of people driving beautiful cars, living in fancy houses, who are depressed and on the border of taking their lives. And so it's about living beyond yourself. Yes, I look at financial abundance as an opportunity to have the choices to make an impact, to live a life that involves less stress and that I can bless more people. But also, even with those things, that I am still understanding that my life is not forced stuff. I want something that lasts beyond myself, and then I want to pour myself into people in that way too. So I think we've just got to have a synergy and balance.
And in my conversation with Scott Myers, who's a screenwriter, he told me, he talked about following your bliss, and what a tragedy it would be if you're climbing the ladder of life and you get to the top of the ladder only to realize that you've been on the wrong ladder this whole time. And we're very susceptible. There's a story that's being told, I think, that's sort of behind the scenes, that we follow, and we believe that new car, new job, new occupation, yada, 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 is what leads us to happiness, when it's been pretty much proven over and over and over again that that's not exactly the case. I think there are three things really in all of my readings of happiness and stuff like that. Serving other people, one of the major components to happiness, being present, living in the present moment, and being grateful, starting your day with gratitude, being grateful that, look, if nothing that I want to happen is happening, I'm still alive. I'm breathing breath. I have my health. My family has their health. My animals are healthy. I love my wife. She's healthy. Like, we have a lot of times, we have memories where we can go back and relive these amazing things that have happened. We have so much to be grateful for if we take a second to realize that maybe we're not where we want to be, but we can still be grateful for so many of the blessings that we already have.
I had a fourth one to your happiness list. Those are all good. And
go.
I've kind of, it's one of those revelations you have in a good conversation.
Sure.
Right now. And I think the fourth dimension that kind of we may lump into service, but I think it's a little different. I think it's sharing your story. I think that each of us, and I walk through and believe bigger these different dimensions. I talk about, as you said, climbing the ladder. I talk about climbing mountains and becoming a mountain climber, and how we can find a sense of identity in what we do. But then sometimes these split rock moments come in, and a split rock moment, something I think I talk about in like chapter 2, where for me, it crumbled me and took me to my knees. I found out 6 days before my wedding that my fiance at the time was cheating on me. And that was just life-shattering, confidence-shattering, heart-shattering, and financially shattering, because I lost everything.
I want to go add to that you built this multi-million-dollar corporation,
Yeah,
and you had systematically given away your clients and dismantled it before the incident, the inciting incident.
Yes, the incident. It sounds like what we would put in a legal document, but you're right.
The inciting incident. It's what leads our heroine to future greatness.
That's true. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, so I find this out, and I had this really successful pro sports agency. I'm 27 years old. When I started it, I had just signed the highest paid defensive end in the NFL. He signed a $62 million 7-year deal. And then I signed Rolls-Royce and then Tiffany and Company and then Nike, and I'm doing endorsement deals and doing TV deals and sitting on the 50-yard lines, and everything is going great. And so when this happens, and I wasn't really prepared for a plan B, because once I decided that I was going to go all the way in this relationship, I was excited about something more than just being an achiever or another resume builder, going to Georgetown for law, being in Miss America. When I was in that relationship, I also got to be a bonus mom. So experiencing putting the baby girl to bath and being called mom, or picking out the clothes for the 8-year-old, that touched a different part of me that was like, whoa, this is a whole nother part of life that I thought maybe would never happen for me, or maybe that because I was successful and an achiever, it would never find me. So that's why I closed all of that down. But when I did, I was embarrassed, and I didn't want to share my story. I didn't feel like, it didn't fit my brand of achievement, and it didn't fit my plan the whole thing certainly didn't fit my plan. There was a part of me that was mad at myself for finding myself in this circumstance. Definitely mad at God for this. I'm like, God, we've been doing this thing of life together all this time. I've tried to follow all the rules, do everything that I'm supposed to do. How do I end up here? And so it took me a process of healing and also working on understanding identity apart from achievement, shifting from success to significance. And even with that, of building in the process, started working with women and men and helping them to find their brands, build their businesses, live their dreams, and then started infusing faith in business, which I thought was a total no-no. But I was just sharing what was true for me, and then it attracted this massive tribe that we now call the Godfidence community. And Godfidence is like not just confidence in yourself, but Godfidence is believing that you have capacity beyond yourself because of coming from a place that's beyond yourself as well. And so the only reason I'm sharing all this is because when we were talking about that fourth dimension of happiness, and I think that there's a part of us each that lives unfulfilled if we never share our story. And we think that we're not necessarily needed. We don't think our story is as important or as impressive. I used to think, these people have real stories. They've overcome real obstacles or real challenges, and we otherness ourselves from other people.
We minimize.
And so I think that's a piece of, I say that I talk a lot in Believe Bigger also about talents versus gifts. And one of our universal gifts, like my gift and your gift are different, but our universal superpower, our universal gift, I believe, is our voice. And I think a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of overwhelm, a lot of being out of alignment is not understanding the story of your life and then not giving yourself permission to share it, to find a superpower that you don't know you have.
Anger and frustration as well manifest themselves. I want to go back for a moment. Speaking of stories and this narrative why did you think you weren't going to find success in your personal life, despite having accomplished all of these amazing and incredible things in your professional life? Why was that a story that you told yourself?
Well, it was definitely an inner story that was emphasized for a very long time. Once you become known for something, you develop an identity. The identity, when you start to say, I looked at myself, I am an achiever. And I wasn't asked out on dates. I didn't have a lot of friends. Part of it was being, again, in this racially unique space. I had friends that I was allowed to be friends with at school, but none of the girls could ever come to my house. There were very few times. And
why couldn't they?
Well, I'll just be direct. There weren't parents who were comfortable with their white kids spending the night at a black family's home. So having sleepovers, a lot of the experiences that a lot of kids had. And I just got used to the idea that this is how it's going to be. I'm just going to focus on now not being looked at as a problem child and achieving. So I spent a lot of time by myself. I was focused. And then I became a competitive baton twirler at 9 years old. Legally blind in my left eye. Doctor said it would be impossible. And thankfully I had already started. Talk about being mentally invincible. I had already started before they told me I couldn't. So I had baton twirling, competitive baton twirling. I trained with one of the best coaches in the world. I am learning a whole heck of a lot about resilience by being an African-American girl in a predominantly white school and neighborhood, and through competition and training. So I had a place to be focused on grade school. And then I got really involved in the Miss America system, and then really involved in youth crime prevention. So I was focused, and I am glad when I look back at it that I learned what most people don't learn in an entire lifetime. I learned before the age of 16 in terms of a champion mindset, how to show up, how to stay focused, how to eliminate distraction. But with that, nobody taught me about balance. They only taught me about achievement. And to a certain extent, my mom's mom and my dad's mom, both of them had elementary school level educations. That's all that they were afforded the opportunity to get. My grandfather ran a newspaper route. Their parents before them were sharecroppers, and then before them were slaves. So the idea of working hard, creating something, there's all of this legacy behind me, upon me as well. So I don't regret that. But also with that, there was not a vision of a woman who was successful at those types of levels and also was a mom. Like, I think right now when you see this whole boss lady movement and the girl boss movement, I call it the boss chicky chick 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 movement, many of the women right now, we are first generation with an opportunity to create financial legacy. And so the women before us had never seen women like us. And so they didn't encourage us in the things outside of the home. And if you were successful outside of their home, they assumed that you didn't know how to cook, which is actually a true statement, but no one would always make comments of, well, you want to be married one day? Really, you? Friends, peers, people would be surprised. And so it's almost like if you're a woman who's successful, they don't see you also as a woman at the core. So dealing with that head trash was something that stuck with me for a very, very long time. It's something that I still have. I think I'm more cognizant of it now, to shoot it down when someone shoots it my way. Like what is that in basketball? Get that out of here. Block that shot. But I used to take it because there were people who were older than me, people who were seemingly wiser. And a lot of what we get told to us that seems like wisdom, it's really somebody else's wounds or somebody else's head trash that they're passing that trash onto you as well.
Which can happen because a lot of, we only have our own personal experience. And because somebody has existed longer, a lot of times we associate that existing with wisdom when it's not actually the case. Being able to discern between the wisdom and, like you said, head trash is of the utmost importance because, again, you can create a story, an inner narrative that really steers you in the wrong direction. So after the incident, can you tell me about growing Marshawn.com and Godfidence movement and, writing the books and all of these things? What was the first step towards rebuilding everything?
So good. So what you called incident, I refer to as a split rock. And inside of the rock, in this passage that I refer to inside of the book, it says that split the rock and then water gushed out. And I remember sitting with this passage for quite some time over a period of a couple of days. And I was like, wait a minute, how do you end up in the desert amongst rocks and then this rock just gets split open and all this water comes out? I'm like, I went to college. I took geology. I don't remember massive reservoirs of water, maybe a little bit of moisture, but not like oases inside of rocks. And so what I had to realize is that in the middle of a tough place that there is new life and that's what the water stands for. And so I believe the first step is actually believing that you're not under attack, but that you're in invitation. That you're in alignment. That's the beginning of believing bigger. It's not to rationalize your circumstances, because when you focus in the realm of rationalization, little me loves that, because then little me will tell you rational lies. And so believing bigger requires you to believe beyond your circumstances, but also to believe beyond what you're going through, what you've been through, and beyond who you think you are. So that first step is believing bigger, meaning getting a bigger vision about who you are, what your life is about, that there is something new. When obstacles come, the obstacle is the opportunity. So it takes maturity to see beyond. That's how you begin to elevate yourself in the middle of the conflict, is not to face the conflict, it's to rise above it and say, what are you building up inside of me? What is the opportunity here? Where is this taking me? What new path might be calling me higher, as opposed to just trying to recover from what's happening or survive what's happening.
The obstacle is the opportunity. I think that's gold in all of our life journeys. We all face suffering. We all face setbacks in personal life, professional life. It's just going to happen. It's a natural part of life.
Yes.
And in Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about suffering leading to self-transcendence if we allow it to. Mm-hmm. And what you're talking about is a perspective, right? It's a perspective of when everything goes to hell in a handbasket, we can give up, we can stop trying, we can stop taking risks, or we can just lean into it and be resilient and strong. You know, learning about you, I know that resilience is, one of your superpowers. I think that...
I hope so. I'm working on it. We were talking about embracing disruption. Embracing disruption, because disruption is the doorway into your destiny. So if you're saying, I want to change my life, I want to change my relationships, I want to lose weight, gain weight, be stronger, I want to be able to run faster, make more, impact more, whatever that is, you are asking for disruption. And nobody tells us this. We are asking for our lives to be split when we ask for a new life. If we're asking for our mind to be, our life to be changed, I say every life shift begins with a mind shift. And that mind shift is going to usually happen from things that will blow your mind and take you out of your current level of thinking, that shatter and disrupt everything around you. But disruption is the doorway into a higher destiny. And again, to be able to, there's something that happens because we have a brain and then we have the mind, right? The brain is an organ. The mind, though, has to be literally reprogrammed and retrained. And you said that it's a perspective. I believe that to be true. I think another layer to that is that it has to become a discipline. That's how you reprogram, is by disciplining. So when something is an obstacle and you see common obstacles, you see certain people, it seems like stuff just keeps happening to them because you ain't learning that lesson yet. Or it's because it's a part of your story. It's a part of your thorn, or it's your kryptonite that is going to always be there. So how do you not just try to get rid of it, but how do you learn to operate above it? That's the discipline. And then as you do that, you then literally become a new person because your mind has been disciplined and retrained to operate in a different way when it sees an obstacle that you now know, wait a minute, I keep seeing this, not because something is wrong with me, but because this is what a superpower, that higher power is trying to get me to realize that I have to actually be able to overcome this. You could have never told me in a million years that I would talk to women about relationships. Not my brand strategist, business strategist, teaching self. And relationships is not what I consider my expertise, but I didn't know it was a voice that I didn't know that I didn't have, right? But now to be able to talk a woman through forgiveness in a way that's not a common way of talking about it, I think. I believe that one of the ways we get past these obstacles, these incidents and these split rock moments, especially those that are betrayal, is instead of focusing on what happened and even focusing on forgiving, because if you're focusing on forgiving, you're still focusing on what happened. And your mind has trouble trying to erase what it knows happened, right? It's like you're trying to tell it that it didn't, and it should just get over it, or these fluffy notions of love and, moving on and letting go. That none of that stuff worked for me. What I had to do was focus on a higher vision of who is the woman that I want to become, not on what somebody else did. And the person that I want to become wants to be able to look back at this situation with a smile, wants to sit on the beach, wants to be able to write a book about this from a place of joy. So for me, forgiveness was more so about future vision and impact, and even envisioning and feeling what it would look like. And then if I was that person, how would she act in that moment? And how can I start embodying that right now? That wasn't easy either, but that to me was more helpful than everyone saying, you've got to release to forgive, you've got to do that. Okay, well, I don't know how you actually do that. The only thing I could focus on was possibility. Who is it that I'm becoming? My life is not my own. How is this for me? And what message would I want to tell my future daughter one day? How would I want her to show up? How can I start being that woman for myself?
Need one of those Men in Black sticks, right? Just boop. Just
that would be great. Exactly.
You mentioned discipline. For me, I don't know for everybody, but my process of that is gratitude. Finding gratitude in things, starting my day off with gratitude, taking that with me throughout the rest of my day. I've told so many similar stories like this on my show, but I'm going to say it again because it's really important. When you start your day off being grateful for what you have, and then knowing that it's going to be something you're doing tomorrow too, you start naturally looking for these gratitude moments. One of those for me, my wife and I were going to a show. We were running a little late. We had to get gas. So every pump at the gas station was full, which never happens, right? It's like, why is this happening while we're running late? And we're sitting there. I'm getting anxious. Cirque du Soleil is starting in like a few minutes and I want to get there. And I just had this moment of clarity. And I thought, I've been to pumps 1,000 times. It's never full. And I'm never once grateful for not having to wait. Right? When you're driving down the interstate and it's just free and clear, we often don't find ourselves grateful for it being free and clear. What we do is we get stuck in traffic and then we start getting annoyed and then we start getting angry and we start getting impatient. So it's this perspective of, oh yeah, I'm facing uncertainty. I'm facing difficulty in my life. I can find gratitude in this, and then I can find gratitude in it tomorrow. And building that discipline, I think, can really help shape your perspective.
And I think a gratitude practice that helped me, particularly in the rebuilding and growth process of shifting from this thing I call these 3 zones we live in: the comfort zone, the split rock moments come in, they split rock us into this growth zone, ultimately to get us to this glory zone. And one of the things that I did is I journaled. And I had a good friend who had just graduated from a university, getting her master's in positive psychology. And she said, there's a lot of science around writing down each day 3 things that you're grateful for. And she's going to want to challenge you to do that at the end of the day. And I took that challenge for months and I did that. And then I added some other levels to it that I asked my clients to do, especially when they're struggling with self-confidence or anxiety of any sort. And it's to write down one thing that you love about yourself in a full sentence. And so it would be, I love that I am creative. I love that about me. And each day you fill in a different blank. I love that I'm giving. I love that about me. Or I love that I smile at people. I love that about me. We don't actually talk about what we love about ourselves. We may talk about what we're happy that we have, what's around us, but even the whole idea of writing, saying, believing. And the reason I have people, when some would say, well, here's what I wrote down, I said, you didn't write it down exactly the way it has to be. There's a reason why at the very end of the statement, you say, I love that about me. It is a reminder back to you, and it's also reprogramming your mind and your spirit to love the things that are about you so that you are less addicted to comparison. And everything about comparison causes one of 2 things, either competition and arrogance, or feeling a sense of insignificance, or that you don't matter, or that you're less than. So having this private moment with you in your journal where it's not just something you've believed in your mind, something you've said with your mouth, but now your eyes can see it. You pulled it out of the atmosphere into the physical realm, which is why I believe heavily in journaling. It's the first, like a blueprint. A building starts usually with an architectural drawing. And so I look at journaling as architecting aspects of your future. And a building would just remain an idea if it stayed in somebody's head. A lot of us think it's enough just to have positive thinking. There's a reason why vision boards work. There's a reason why blueprints are designed before something comes up. And this is one of the things we can do to re-architect our own confidence, our own mindset, a sense of peace and joy. And I think it's taking what you're saying around appreciation, but also something that's very practical. I did it. And I think it's something that every single one of us can do in a disciplined way. It's 1 sentence.
That's an awesome, actionable step. Can you direct people to a specific journal? Are there ones that are set up specifically to do things in the way that you like having them done?
So funny you asked that. So that's one of the things I literally this morning was like, I got to do my Believe Bigger journal People have been asking for deeper ancillary studies and journals on how I journal. So far, I've used blank journals. The first set of journal that I did was called a dream journal. They're out of print now, but they were blank and it had an affirmation. I speak in quotes apparently. And so I have a lot of quotes and it had one at the top. But the reason being is, I draw what I feel sometimes and sketch out things. It's funny that when I was in 6th grade, I remember my art teacher basically telling me that this would not be my career and kind of discouraging me from that. But I literally draw everything that I give to my graphic designer. Inside of Believe Bigger, there's a purpose map in here. I hired an amazing illustrator to map out, but she drew what I drew. And she tried to do her own thing. I was like, no, this is what I want it to be. It's what I thought in my head.
Yeah.
So I don't have the gift of drawing, but I have the gift of outlining what I see in my head and bringing it from the unseen realm into the seen realm. And I think that sometimes having free space, and for those people who are really regimented, I want to challenge you to get a blank journal that you can start writing your ideas down. Give yourself a chance to explore more creative thought. I use both lined and unlined. Sometimes when I have my ideas journal, that's my one that has no lines. And then the one where I'm just like writing down my quiet time reflections or those affirmations, those are the ones that I use my line. If you ask my husband, you'll see. Got kind of a lot of journals going on around here.
Hey, practice what you preach, right? That's the way it's supposed to be. As an aside, I feel you didn't mention it, but I feel your pain. And I made a book called A Thoughtful Gift. It's like a prompt guided journal that goes through your relationship from past, present, future with the significant other. And I hired an illustrator, and actually verbalizing what you would like created in an illustration is very difficult. Because there's a lot of detail that you overlook in those illustrations. So we had, I think it ended up being 20 something illustrations, but there were hundreds of iterations where I was like, oh, I'm sorry, man. I forgot this. Let's move this around.
Yeah.
But
and
anyway.
you have to be confident enough, even when maybe you're not a graphic designer in terms of having that precision and skill where that's what you're going to be hired for. But I do believe I've had to embrace, and I tell people, one of the other things you said, how do you grow? You believe bigger. You start investing in yourself. I believe that's absolutely critical, to invest in who it is you want to become. There's this passage I love in the Bible that says, where your treasure is, your heart is also, which means where you put your money shows what you're really passionate about. So if you want to become this new person, invest in it. I wanted to be a lawyer. I had to invest in that. But we think, our life is going to change. It's just going to happen. No, we have to invest our way into that. And then the third thing I think is really important is that you own your own incredibleness. And so I had to own that, hey, look, I may not be the graphic designer, but I have an eye for this. I learned this when I was on The Apprentice. And the week I was project manager was week 2, and we were doing an advertising campaign for Lamborghini. And I'm talking about full commercial, print campaign, and even collateral material like brochures, and presented this to the chief marketing officer of Lamborghini and Kaplan Thaler, one of the largest advertising agencies in the world. And our team of women, led by me, beat the men's team, where the project manager was a former NFL player, full team of guys. And I was like, snap, we not only won this, like we handed their lunch to them on a silver platter. And I learned during that process, I had an eye for branding, that I could talk to creative director, like, this is where the yellow line needs to go. Here's how I want this. Here's the mood. Here's how I want the women to walk in wearing all black, everyone's ponytail slick. I didn't know that. I was in law school. I was a couple of weeks from graduating law school when I was on The Apprentice. So even though for those of us who are creative visionaries but may not be graphically creative, it is important that you also invest in understanding elements of design, elements of brand, elements of mood, and recognizing you may not be great at it, but you do have something that represents a visual manifestation of the vision of what you have that is going to attract your clients. It is going to attract those, because they always say your vibe attracts your tribe. And I think it's dangerous just to let someone completely come up with your identity when it's your vision and you've been given the responsibility to steward it. So I like to draw things, and even, and I used to do for my athlete clients, I had to teach myself this. I decided that I could send their website projects out externally, or I could keep them in-house. So I not only hired a graphics team, but I was still a creative director. Nothing went to the client until I saw it. And learning how to communicate, I found it was easier if I could learn how to sketch layouts, because a lot of graphic designers don't understand conversion marketing and layout. And so just learning how to do some of those things, I wouldn't say it is look, no one's going to hire me for that, but that's not what I want to be hired for, but I can oversee someone's vision and bringing it forth. And that's a gift. So you got to think about, what is that for you? I think a lot of us take our hands off and we just want someone to do it for us. And there's a part of you that you're missing out that you don't even realize you're good at until you step into it a bit more.
And, it's about tangibly understanding what it is you're undertaking. Like simply for this podcast, the first 4 episodes, I edited each of them myself. Mm-hmm. It was mind numbing. By the time they finally released, I never wanted to listen to any of those podcasts again, because I had listened to them probably 100 times editing them, and it wasn't fun. And I could have outsourced it to a producer, but I want to understand the process. I want to understand what it is they're going to do, because first of all, what if I hire a producer that isn't very good? And I don't even know that they're not good because I don't understand what's happening, right? Yeah. You need to have a cursory understanding of how these things work, because it's just, the benefits are massive, and you need to know how to direct people, very specifically actionables.
That's so good. I learned that in sports, being a woman running a professional sports agency, managing men, that I needed to learn a little bit about a lot. The first year of my sports agency, I did my own accounting in partnership with an accountant. I said, I want to understand how this works. And it has now, after that first year, and she walked me through a chart of accounts, how to code things, why with the IRS. And it gave me language to have a conversation with her. Even though I now am on a much bigger firm that handles more complex matters, I can still have those conversations with them. And then because I'm a lawyer by trade, I think strategically, and I'm able to push them. So I think this is one great piece of advice for people who do have to hire people. Never let someone tell you what to do. You want to be in partnership with those that you hire, people who tell you why they do what they do. And if someone is unwilling to do that, they're not on your team. They're controlling. Right. And I learned so much about that, but I also realized I need to learn I know a little bit about coding. I know a little bit about design. I know a little bit about copy. I think I'm actually a lot more when it comes to copy, but I started learning a little bit about a lot. And I think that's the sign of understanding your actual business. And so that's a really great point. One last thing that you had mentioned earlier about a journaling resource, I would say that inside of Believe Bigger, my most recent book, the subtitle is Discover the Path to Your Life Purpose. I walk readers through these 5 stages of stepping into their purpose. And at each stage, there's a critical question. And then within each stage, also, there's these sub-questions that really help you get to the sense of what are the inner stories that you've been telling yourself? What are the mountains you've been climbing? What have your split rocks been? What's the bigger mess inside of the message? And so I think even just taking through some of these aspects, it's really designed to be a high-end seminar that you get for a $25 book. My seminars are anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000, and then our coaching programs are anywhere from $10,000 up to $50,000. So I really took the time to put in the most quality gift I think that I've been given is helping people unlock their purpose. And I had to own that. A lot of people talk about it, and I was, well, this is happening. So I think in terms of those looking for also a journaling resource, that there's a lot of journaling prompts inside the book as well too.
Awesome. Another thing too, going back to learning a little bit right now, like a very tangible, specific example is Facebook ads. Netta Talmor, who's an online entrepreneur, one of her students invested like $1,000, paid somebody $500 for a $500 ad spend, and got 0 conversions, got nothing out of the experience, right? And didn't even know what went wrong, didn't know the questions to ask as to why this happened. So when you don't have just a cursory or basic fundamental knowledge of what's going on, you don't have the right questions, and you're not able to get out of the experience everything that you could have otherwise. So let's move to the lightning round. That's not very lightning-y. What's an assumption that you think people make about their lives that you think they should spend more time thinking about?
I think one assumption is that I need to work on my weaknesses as opposed to living in my strengths. and thinking that doing so is somehow self-serving, selfish, or not noble. But there is a magnetic pull towards mediocrity here in this world. And so we spend a lot of time, we want people to get up to that mean, to that middle place, but we don't want them to get too far, and so then we tear them back down. And so we really talk to people more, and even we raise our kids to focus on building up all of their weaknesses as opposed to focusing on their strengths.
So specialize versus diversity.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think that's a good summation. I believe that clarity is an incredibly powerful thing. And for some reason, the world wants us to stay in a fog. When you're clear, people start calling you names. Oh, who do you think you are? Or you're arrogant, or you're stuck up, or you're just all about money. You're just all about achievement. You're just all about your family. You're all about whatever is important that you've decided to be important to you. People want to pull you out of that. And so when you get clear about what you're good at, don't try to muddle it up, like continue to build upon that, and it might open new levels and new dimensions. But yeah, I think when you say the specificity versus diversity, or even expertise, like I think that you're always a student of what you're a real expert at. I think there can be an ego part where you can get too caught and believe your own hype to a point where it's dangerous.
Yeah,
humbly choosing to operate at the highest level of your superpowers also means remaining a student.
And that outside noise, the people asking those questions or making these comments about whatever it is you're choosing, most of the time, those comments are a reflection of how they themselves feel on the inside. So don't take it personally. Keep doing what you're doing. What's a piece of conventional wisdom that you often hear given that you disagree with?
If I got to do it right, I got to do it myself. That is really bad head trash that's been passed down for generations. It's one of those pieces of thought that's become toxic but normalized. And I had a lot of bad experiences growing up with trusting other people, whether it was in school and we have a class project and I'm the one who's going to take it all on. And even growing up as a competitive baton twirler, baton twirling, much like competitive gymnastics, is a solo sport. You don't have to really rely on your team. There's nobody else up there that's going to throw up 1, 2, 3 batons, spin around, catch one behind your head, behind your back, and then under the leg. Other than you, you don't have anybody else to blame. So I internalized that I perform best by myself. And there's an aspect to that. It's just not that it's the best. It's just it's what's familiar. It's how I trained. And you can be anything that you train. Anything that you water grows. Now, my brother, he's a year and 3 days younger than me. He played team sports. He was a quarterback at Rice University. He played football, basketball, baseball, soccer, club soccer. And so he learned, and I admire him to this day when I see how he works with teams. I see how he doesn't have to be out front, that he can support a vision, and that's his superpower. I also see how he knows how to build up other people in a way that, because that is what's also familiar for him and how he's trained. And so there's an aspect of this whole thing for those who are achievers. We have a distrust of others, and some of that's because we haven't trained ourselves to learn how to be team players. And so that's something that I constantly work with myself on, is not trying to do it all my own and even just my way. And one of my big shifts right now is a women's community that I've opened up called She Profits, and people can go there at sheprofits.com to learn about it. But it is really how to elevate an entire group of women where they don't just look at me as their fearless leader, but look at themselves as a community of fearless leaders.
And all of these things that you have going on, I think, is a testament that you are a team player. You have to be. I'm feeling tired just thinking about all of these different projects that are swirling around at the same time. That's a lot of energy.
Thank you.
What's something related to performance that you see people waste a lot of time on that doesn't give them much in the way of results?
I would say an obsession with perfectionism. It's such a delay tactic. It is one of the prime traps of little me. Perfection is not what is required. The only thing that is required is progress. And one of the other things I talk about in Believe Bigger is the concept of starting before you're ready, understanding that you'll never be ready. And now, look, for an achiever like myself, it is a constant realization to step into good is good enough. And then find the balance, because, if I feel like my team is half stepping, that's not what you're here for, right? I want people to bring their best. I believe in showing up in alignment with the ethos of our company at Me Unlimited, is to operate in a way that is without limits. It's that we don't put limits on ourselves by half stepping. So that's a value for me. But also, so it's a balance of trying to figure out, okay, when is it time to actually open the floodgates, right? And I look at them as floodgates, not just doors, because when you do open something, if you operate from the mindset of abundance and you truly believe that God is for you and with you, and that you're on this path going into greater places and spaces to help more people, when you do say yes, like you did to starting this podcast, or like someone else did when they said, you know what, I'm going to get out of this bed of depression and I'm just going to say yes and go to counseling, versus saying, I've got to be better before I go to counseling, or I need to have my life together before I can tell my story. All of that stuff is closing, not just a door, but literally closing the floodgates that you don't even realize. So progress, not perfection. Show up as your best, yes. Give it your all. Invite a team around you to go in like the warriors you want to see other people, because you're going to inspire others to know what they're capable of. But don't make perfectionism the goal. Make progress day by day by day, and showing up with each step. And sometimes your best step, and this might be for someone who's really struggling right now, your best might be just brushing your teeth today. I've been there. I've been in that season when I didn't know I was going to pay my bills. And so for me, progress was just, I'm getting up and I'm going to go to the grocery store and I'm going to do my best to get through this day. And for somebody else, it might be, I'm going to start that podcast, or I'm going to start that business, or I'm going to leave this relationship or say yes to this relationship. But whatever your yes is, it's progress, not perfection.
If you look at it functionally, over the course of a year, 365 days, if I spend a whole year trying to make the perfect podcast episode, the perfect one, right? And then I release it at the end of that year, or I make one every single week over the course of a year, I look back on every single episode and actionably ask myself, what went right here? What went wrong? What could I do better? And steadily improve. Maybe that first one is not as good as the one that took a year, but I guarantee you the 52nd one is going to be light years ahead of the one. So get in there, get in the dirt, play around, learn, and try to continually grow.
And isn't it funny how sometimes the ones we spend the most time on with anything, they end up doing well, but then some of the stuff that we thought was just okay, you're like, well, how did that take off? Or that was imperfect, and it was like, I didn't even know anyone was interested in that.
Yeah, I've been a professional poker player for a long time, and I made training video, and I made one that was on studying. It took me 4 hours. I had a goal. I said, I'm making a theory video that's a slideshow in 4 hours. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to release it, and I'm just going to let it go. So I did that. Had anxiety about it for like months after I released it. Like, I should have spent more time. I should have done more. That video was better received than all of my other ones. Some of my podcast episodes that I've finished up with them, and I'm like, I don't know. I could have done better. I should have asked this question or that question. I talked to my audience, and they're like, oh, that was my favorite episode ever, right? It's amazing how our perspective of things and other people's perspective is just completely different.
Transparency is a key to prosperity.
Yeah, and vulnerability too. Like you said, people are drawn to vulnerability because, like we've said in this show, everybody suffers. Everybody has these feelings of insecurity. And when, like you shared your story in your book, which is incredibly vulnerable, right? That's an incredibly vulnerable thing to share, where you're just putting yourself out there, saying that, you had trouble waking up in the morning and brushing your teeth. That is an incredibly vulnerable thing to share, but we can all relate to that because we've all been there. We've all gone through that. And that's what draws people in, that vulnerability. Having this image of perfection and getting everything right, in my opinion, doesn't resonate with people the way authenticity and vulnerability does.
Sure.
So speaking of all these projects, what does your typical morning routine look like? What do you actionably do?
Oh, gosh. Okay. So as you say that, I know that my routine has gotten a little bit slack with traveling this year. And to a point that you're asking me this, I feel like it is a sign that I go back to my basics.
Speaking of vulnerability.
Yeah. Traveling this year has been a stretch. My mom had a couple surgeries this year, and usually when I'm not on the road, and I've been on the road pretty much every week, almost every day this entire year.
Wow.
As we're recording this, it's November. So it's been a heck of an emotional roller coaster. And I do recognize that maybe some of my stamina has waned a bit because I haven't followed my morning routine. But what I like to do is not have my cell phone in my bedroom, which I had completely cut out. But then because I wanted to have the phone next to me if there was an emergency, I brought my phone back in the room. What I like to do is to start my morning with the gratitude and also with quiet time. For me, that involves walking into a separate closet that I have a room that my husband and I have a nicely sized home, but it's only the two of us. So one room I turned into a reading room, and a closet that's in that bedroom I use as my prayer closet. And I'm saying these things out loud because the listeners are just listening. Marshawns talking to herself right now about her recommitment. And I would say the last thing is making sure that I take all of these very wonderful vitamins and nutrients that I spent a lot of time learning about that will help me with stamina. So appreciation in the morning, quiet time. For me, that also involves reading, having a little bit of time of journaling, praying. That means I'm talking to God, but also listening. And then taking all the good stuff that I know is necessary. Not looking at that phone in the morning.
Yeah, that phone, it's a losing battle. If it's in the room, it's going to win. There's just too much money's been invested and spent into capturing your attention and getting you to mess around with it. For us to, we're easy targets as human beings, right? All the notifications, all the things, we have this thirst for knowledge that we want to know. We want to check our email, Twitter, Instagram, all the distractions of the world.
Yeah. So my commitment to myself for the next 7 days, starting tomorrow, I'm going to post on my Facebook page to hold myself accountable. But I'm going to do for 7 days and get it going back again. And especially since it's holiday season, there's a little less distraction. I think it's a good time to create some momentum in that space.
I will like your Facebook page and comment on that post every day. Let's get it done. So you're a rabid fan of any blogs or resources? And if so, which ones?
One of my favorite resources is actually Brian Johnston. It's called Optimize. He's the philosopher. He calls himself a philosopher, and he summarizes a lot of great books. And so there are a lot of things that I am a member of. I've been a fan of his summations for years now. He provided so much free content. The moment that he provided a free resource, I first felt compelled just to invest back in and how much value he's given out. I have a desire one day for Believe Bigger, one of my works, to be summarized by him because he is so good at pulling out what he calls the big ideas. And so that's one of the things that I also enjoy listening to. And I download a lot of his philosopher notes and classes so I can listen to them on airplane rides.
Awesome. We'll definitely put that in the show notes. I'm all for getting the big ideas. Speaking of books, do you have any books that you reread every few years? And if so, which ones?
I love Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art. So good about dealing with resistance. I actually gave that out to all of the attendees at my conference because I feel like it's one of those books that you don't have to read it all in one setting. You could, but I think you actually miss it. I feel like you should read it straight through and then come back and do like daily doses. It's a great little, reminder that resistance is about to show up today. Before you walk out of this room, before you walk out of this house, before you get on your computer, remember it's coming, and here's how to recognize it. So I think it really helps arm you with resistance. I read my Bible regularly, and I actually read my own journals because I think a lot of times we get stuck on or addicted to and in the pattern of reading other people's filtered revelation versus the powerful really thing about journaling is that you can look at snapshots in different seasons of your life and you can see this common theme and pattern. I ended up getting married to an amazing man. A lot of people asked him, did you ask for forgiveness for what you did? And he's like, I'm not the guy. I'm not the guy who cheated on her. I'm not that guy. I'm the happy ending guy. Get to chapter 16. But I was kind of wrestling one day with the sense of direction. He said, pick up any journal that you have over the last 10 years. And I promise you, you're going to see a common pattern. I'm like, no, you're not. And I pick it up. He's like, okay, now pick up another one. Open it up to any page. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so true. Like our lives really are fairly unpredictably predictable when you look at the common pattern that goes throughout. And so I read my own writings because they really are, they become fresh teachings, and you always open up to what you need to hear in that moment, as opposed to going to something new. What if we mastered what we were already received and what we were already working on?
And for building awareness, that's the mother lode right there. You're putting your thoughts down tangibly, building awareness of those thoughts when you read it back. That is gold right there. Thank you so very much. So what's a project you're working on right now that is near and dear to your heart?
Oh, there's a couple. Because I'm a multitasker, I gave myself a year. I actually closed down or paused my mastermind programs during the time of Believe Bigger so that I could really be open to experiencing something that I hadn't experienced purely through coaching. And I had been a professional speaker for a long time. I stepped back from that to really build a true coaching business. And through that, I discovered this whole new world, not a new world, but a world that I thought I wasn't going back into, which was corporate. I didn't think corporate America would be interested in a message of purpose, belief, and faith. Just didn't see that coming. And so it rewrote my own inner story about where a message doesn't belong. And I'm going to 10 different countries next year. So I've been working on building out our team of coaches and trainers, and also instructional design for our Believe Bigger trainings and our purpose trainings that are really exploding right now globally in corporate. I'm also working on She Profits. It will be opening up soon. By the time you hear it might be already open. But if you're a woman who's looking to grow your income and influence, at sheprofits.com. And then also, I really desire to launch, as I told you before we started, a podcast. And so I am excited. As we get off, I'm interviewing some folks to kind of talk about getting that process started. And so that's the next thing. I won't say the name, but what I will say is that's another thing that my face lights up when I talk about the opportunity to speak life into people with no interruptions and with no limits and nobody telling me what I got to say, what I got to do. And for it to be, what I will say, it's going to be a place that is this intersection of faith and business, and also really practical peak performance. What does it take to be a champion? Like, I love the whole thing of what does it take to step into your destiny, your potential, your possibility. I love faith, and I love business. So I wanted to have a place where everyone could come together and hear a little bit about a lot. I
love podcasts. I don't know. I don't know if you know that. I love podcasts. No, it's super. That's all super exciting. Whenever you do launch the podcast, reach out to me. Let me know. I'll promote it on my channels and do what I can to help you.
I'd love to have someone on there who knows how to play poker. I wonder if you can find somebody.
Yeah. Good luck. I don't know if I know somebody. All right. So, have you ever strongly believed something in life, only to reverse course later on? And if so, what led to that change of belief?
There have been a lot. I would say that marriage has taught me the most about what I misbelieve. Because when you live for yourself, you think that there's a way that things have to happen, and really it's just your sense of control. So I would say marriage has taught me the most about recognizing judgment, about recognizing where I'm trying to control the outcome of a circumstance, where normally it would have seemed like wisdom. But now I've learned that it's really more about control. So even just having the awareness of it, I would say that marriage is such a magnifier to teach you about how immature you really are in so many ways.
Yeah, about how little, about how there's room for growth in many different areas. If you could share one truth with the world, what would that truth be?
My truth has always been that all things are possible. I believe they're possible with God. That's my personal truth. I don't believe that I am in my physical body capable of doing the things that my mind's eye perceives. And so that keeps me humble. That keeps me on my knees, but also standing strong, like what I call a warrior princess, is that I know that there is a greater power that intended my life for such a time as this, that is given me, like, not just a resume, but an amazing faith history to be on The Apprentice, Miss America, to have $200,000 in scholarships, to go to Georgetown, to start a business, to lose stuff, but also to show me what I was made of, to be able to build not just my life, but to build up the lives of other people. And so I believe in this message of possibility. I'm passionate about raising up a generation of women and men who are what I call possibility catalysts, who believe bigger and therefore live bolder. But that cannot happen unless you first dare to believe that all things are actually possible.
And that's an amazing testimony that I know resonates with people. So finally, last question, where can my audience find you on the World Wide Webs?
I'm pretty easy to find. You can just go to Marshawn.com, Marshawn, Marshawn.com. And if you click on the Start Here button, you'll get a free gift from me called Manifest Miracles. It was the first thing that I really gave myself permission to do on peak performance. And I was like, how do I not have a separate resource just for that? So instead of charging for it, I decided to make it completely complimentary to people. So you can get all that at Marshawn.com. The book, Believe Bigger, is at BelieveBigger.com. And if you love it, I would love for you to leave a review on Amazon. It's also an audiobook. And a lot of people end up getting both the audiobook and the physical book. Some people are e-readers. It's available in all those formats. But I've enjoyed being able just to teach people about the intersection between belief and purpose, mindset, but also steps that we take.
And it's an amazing book. Be sure to check that out. BelieveBigger.com, right?
Yes.
Marshawn, thank you so much for your time, your energy. I'm very grateful and appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for you. As we're doing this, I know people are going to be hearing, but I'm looking at you on video. And now so much makes sense about the whole poker and the demeanor. And I'm like, oh, he's a silent killer. I love it. I get it. I love it. I get it. But thank you for having me. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you unleash in terms of possibility in all of us.
Next time on the Process Podcast. Since you're a lover of this show, I'll go out on a limb and assume you've watched a TED Talk or 100. Have you ever wondered about the preparation and fear that goes into standing on the stage in front of hundreds or thousands of people and then knowing that video is going to be placed on the internet and distributed to millions of people worldwide? In my conversation with author and psychotherapist William Pullen, we talk about that very thing.
And my great fear was that I would freeze, and I can't tell you how many times I practiced that speech. I mean, I'd go play it at night while I was sleeping over and over again. I'd read it backwards. I'd geolocate it in different parts, print it out, read it in different rooms, so then you walk through the rooms during the speech. I mean, I've read 4 books on giving a TED Talk and how to speak publicly. I joined Toastmasters International in order to become a better speaker. I had a lot riding on that thing.
And it's a 10-minute speach too, right? It's 10 minutes.
But my goodness, it happened once or twice in there, and I suddenly got the fear, and boom, it went. I was blank.
If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Process Podcast or head to mentallyinvincible.com and join my email newsletter, because this is an episode you don't want to miss.